CS2 confidently holds first place in concurrent players on Steam, surpassing giants like Dota 2 and PUBG. At first glance, its gameplay might seem somewhat outdated. No dynamic shootouts with sliding mechanics, drone control, or global environmental destruction. However, CS offers something that makes it unique: perfectly calibrated corridor-style maps. This format best reveals the essence of the first-person shooter genre. Simple, intuitive mechanics combined with depth that requires mastery, shooting, tactical positioning, and grenades. Everything is extremely concise, yet every detail can change the outcome of a round. At the center of the Counter-Strike series' success lies thoughtful level design. Map design, combined with gameplay, has made the game more than distinctive for a long time. Therefore, today we'll examine what makes CS2's level design successful. How are maps developed? How does this affect the game's relevance? And what problems do CS2 maps have? There are many questions, so let's break them down. Level design is one of the key components in the complex mechanism that any video game represents, and simultaneously one of the most misunderstood terms in game development by players. On one hand, a game without level design is like soccer without a soccer field. Any game needs space where the user will exist, and often these very spaces set the quality bar for the entire gaming experience. Good level design isn't just a beautiful picture, proper architecture, and a set of situations. It's more about a tool that allows you to control the game's pace, manipulate player attention, tell stories, and force the use of movement skills for victory. The true contribution of a level designer often goes unnoticed. When discussing an interesting location, players usually remember vivid visuals, atmospheric sound design, climactic and beautiful moments, things that level authors don't directly handle. There are once popular videos in the speed level design category that could be misleading. The virtual space that the author builds in Fast Forward is very impressive, but completely unsuitable for an actual game from a functional standpoint. Real level designers do completely different work. They're responsible for implementing the game's concept and mechanics on the map, which are conceived by the game designer. The visual component of a level belongs to the game development field called level art, meaning the artistic design of the map. This is handled by environment artists. They come up with the location style, color scheme, create 3D models, and work with lighting. Simply put, level design is about how things play, while level art is about how things look. However, it's not uncommon for level design and art design to be performed by the same person. Now, let's move on to CS2's level design and explain how it works. Dust 2 seems to be the most popular map from all games in general. When any game introduces tools for creating custom maps, Dust 2 is the first thing they port. For example, in Far Cry, Insurgency, and even Minecraft and Fortnite. But what's the secret of this map? It seems to be simplicity. The developers of the original Counter-Strike series managed to find such a formula where the map's relevance doesn't disappear even 25 years after the release of its original concept. Of course, many details have changed over time, but the essence remained the same. The map's foundation consists of 3 routes: the path to Bomb Site B, the center, and the path to Bomb Site A. These are the main roads where the team clashes occur. If you look at the map's layout, you can identify a feature. It's composed in the form of a square, or more precisely, a foursquare. The main roads form 4 connected squares. By the way, an example of square map construction can be found in another well-known game called Dota 2. At the foundation level, Dust 2 has the simplest scheme. The player fights not with the level, but with their opponents. No special tactics are needed for victory. It's enough to simply shoot well. Most maps are more complex than Dust 2. They have more competitive potential, since at the professional level, shooting skills are at a high level, and what decides is precisely gameplay variability with various tactics. For example, on the Inferno map. This very map can be safely contrasted with Dust 2. It's made in a completely different form. Here, a triangle figure is clearly distinguished, since 3 main paths lead to the map's center. Such maps require greater knowledge of tactics. It's considered that 4 square maps are much simpler to create, and in terms of gameplay, less variable. This is explained by the fact that the map is based on ordinary road symmetry. A triangle only looks simpler on the surface, since establishing balance here is much more difficult. The peculiarity of current maps in CS2 is that they rarely resemble each other. They're united by established Valve rules of balance and level design. Looking locally, each map is unique. It's not for nothing that there's a selection stage. Each team somehow plays stronger on certain maps. For example, players who are strong in aim choose Dust II, and those who want to use tactics prefer maps like Inferno. If you analyze Counter-Strike maps, you can identify that there are mainly exactly 3 main paths. Over the years, it's been found that this is the ideal formula for 5v5 player matches. With fewer roads, maps would lose their variability, and with more, they'd lose the shooter's dynamics. If there's 3 roads, enemy appearance is easier to predict and more time can be spent on firefights rather than searching for the opponent. Layouts are simple, easy to remember, and impossible to get lost in. Firefights are focused on a small number of directions, since there aren't many intersections on levels. Player collision points in level design are called checkpoints. For example, on Dust II, this is the exit to B from the tunnel, which represents a narrow corridor on the path to the bomb site. Map authors compose levels so that player collisions occur in specific places. They calculate the time teams will need to reach control points from their spawn location. Sometimes, teams can arrive at points simultaneously, but more often one side is given a small advantage in taking position. If the advantage seems too large, map authors add certain obstacles that will delay players. It turns out that the map structure is asymmetric in favor of attackers, while timings are symmetric. CS isn't Dota, so having just 3 paths isn't sufficient to ensure game dynamics. To ensure variability, level designers introduce diversity in map geometry through different paths to the bomb site: turns, cover, angles, stairs, objects. This helps take a convenient position and brings more tactical shooting to the game. Another way to diversify the map is to add connecting routes, so-called connectors. They allow combining routes and moving from one position to another if breaking through defense doesn't work. This is called rotation. Thanks to connectors, players have at least 2 ways to reach the same point. You can safely assume where the opponent will come from, but you'll never know for sure. An excellent example can be given from Dust II. If terrorists went into the tunnel hoping to exit to plant B, but breaking through defense didn't work, they can easily go into the lower tunnel and end up in mid, from where they can already go to short, exit to mid, or turn around and regroup the attack. If you look at the infantry maps of the latest Battlefield, they represent a corridor with various cover for firefights. They're often just about stuck gameplay, where sides simply shoot at each other. There's no emphasis on balance and rotations. The developers specifically designed the map to ensure maximum arcade mode, which excludes any esports component, since we're not talking about tactics here, but about open firefights. One of the main features of CS2 maps is visual simplicity, corresponding to the game's style. If we talk about Fortnite's style, what comes to mind? Funny atmosphere, cartoon-like graphics. If we mention Rainbow Six, it's tactical thinking and finding the opponent, accompanied by environmental destructibility. And when we talk about CS, its style is simple graphics, easily distinguishable player models at any point on the map. CS2 level designers intentionally keep the picture without excesses so that what's happening is easier to perceive. An extra half second that a player spends reading a player model among the environment puts them at a disadvantage, as it damages the game's competitive component. CS maps lack visual noise. The opponent is always visible. There are no weather effects, pleasant lighting that doesn't make you strain to see someone. For example, when character model skins were released in CSGO, developers faced a problem where some skins, for instance 2 dark ones, gave an advantage because the model blended with the surroundings. Because of this, they had to change not only the skin itself, but also adjust the contrast of certain maps. In CS2, one of the key techniques when creating multiplayer maps is thoughtful zone separation by color and style. This helps players quickly orient themselves and remember the terrain. Each map area is coded with a certain atmosphere. On Dust II, when approaching point A through Long, you'll see light gray-blue tones, city signs, and urban atmosphere. Moving into the tunnel, you'll immediately notice how the map darkens. And exiting to point B, you'll find yourself among warm orange shades and ancient-style architecture. Such clear color and stylistic distinction of zones allows you to instantly understand where you are and not get lost in space. Visual landmarks also help remember the map. They could be located both outside the level, for example the large crane above the Vertigo map, and on the map itself. On Dust II, the place where the goose graffiti is located in honor of the map's creator became known by that name in the community. Over the years, the community's created designations for practically all places located on the map. This greatly simplifies communication. Creating a map in CS2 itself isn't just a hobby, but a real art that requires both technical skills in working with tools and certain creative thinking. Creating a dark castle in Minecraft is simple, the game lends itself to construction, but making the same castle in CS2 is no easy task. Moreover, without understanding the game's principles and gameplay, creating a map is impossible. Every designer must spend some time immersing themselves in the game's specifics and understanding its features. To create a map, first you need to decide what mode it can potentially be used for. The game mode on the map is distinguished by designations embedded in the map's name. Officially in CS2, there are 3 types: bomb defusal, hostage rescue, arms race. Besides this, there are also custom maps like 1v1 aim maps and zombie mode, and much more related to minigames. Having decided on the mode, you need to come up with a map concept. Ideally, you should sketch a top-down view, a schematic map plan, marking key zones, team spawn locations, movement paths, meeting points, and objective locations. It's important to think through balance. Both teams should have equal chances of reaching key points. A good map is distinguished by thoughtful flow. Players naturally move through the level, memorable layout, orientation using recognizable landmarks, and absence of dead zones that have no gameplay purpose. It would also be useful to gather references of real places and iterate on the design. For instance, some CS maps were created based on real place prototypes, like Rialto from CSGO. You could take any layout and then improve it through refinements and testing. After this, you should answer questions like, how many main paths will there be? Are there height differences on the map? Should the map be large? And so on. Once we've thought through all the main points, it's time to move on to implementation. The main tools for creating maps are easy to find. They're right in Steam. Installing Valve Hammer editors done through Counter-Strike's additional properties, but there's a catch at the very beginning. The program uses ray tracing for game lighting, so creating maps requires an RTX series graphics card. Creating custom models is done in third-party applications, like Blender. First, the project's created and marked with the chosen map mode prefix. Hammer's interface greets us with several windows: top view, front, side, and 3D window. In Source 2, map development became mesh-based, where instead of classic brushes from the old engine, you operate with polygonal objects. Roughly speaking, maps were previously made from cube-like shapes that formed map walls. Now you need to use the mesh editing tool, face extrusion, cutting, etc. to create optimized level geometry. Otherwise, lighting artifacts may occur. Initially, map geometry sketches are made according to the design. Primitives are available: cubes, prisms, cylinders, from which we form walls and turn them into more complex shapes. We place main structures, corridors, rooms, and cover in the form of simple blocks, remembering to adhere to developer-regulated scales. We also install a skybox, the sky in the form of a huge box, larger than the entire structure. When the geometry sketches are ready, we add lighting. Source 2 mainly uses artificial lighting in the form of point light sources for lamps or directed sources for spotlights. Initial lighting consists of global light, which relates to light from the sky or sun. Parallel to this, we start applying textures, materials, to surfaces. Source 2 has a complete list of each VMAT format material already built into Hammer. We find a suitable texture, concrete, metal, earth, and etc., and apply it to meshes using the texturing tool. Texture scale and orientation can also be easily adjusted. There are also ready-made CS2 item models like doors, boxes, barrels, and other environmental objects. Now we add game entities, player spawn points. For this, we use entities, which are game world objects that have physical properties or behavior. Along with this, we place a buy zone at spawn. We install an invisible cube, designate it as an entity, and set properties for which team can buy. At bomb sites, we need to install an invisible box and assign it as a specific entity, specifying A or B plant in the properties. The zone should be spacious so the bomb can be planted at different points, but not excessively large. After this, we perform a so-called fast compile of the map, building geometry, calculating lighting and visibility. We make sure we can actually run our map and see how it preliminarily looks. Sound design increases the map's realism and tactical value. However, sound setup is a complex task because it's done through a text file and writing specific logic, for example, code. For a standard competitive map, complex scripts aren't required. basic logic's built into the game itself: round timer, bomb behavior, victory conditions. However, logical entities might be needed for various interactive map elements. For example, doors and elevators, buttons and mechanisms, breakable objects. Hammer Editor provides the classic event reaction linking system, entity inputs and outputs, familiar from Source. Practically every entity has outputs, events, and inputs, commands, that could be linked. You can create logic chains. For example, you can make some effect trigger when the bomb explodes. Although in competitive maps, additional logic for such events usually isn't required. Everything's managed by the engine. Counter-Strike 2 also supports new scripting capabilities. In particular, Source 2 introduced the vScript 2 system, TypeScript-based scripts, as well as visual scripting Pulse. These tools allow implementing very complex logic, from creating new modes and weapons to unique interactive mechanics. However, in the context of a typical competitive map, they're usually not needed. It's no secret that CS2 maps began looking much better compared to their predecessor. The new engine allowed implementing improved technical solutions in the game, but maps aren't just about fresh visuals, they're also the root of the gameplay component. Current map shortcomings significantly affect the gaming component. Cheaters find game possibilities that honest players would never think of. RageBot in CS2 allows automatic shooting with absolute accuracy, including through walls via the auto wall function, which automatically scans walls for penetration possibility and damage dealing to opponents through tracing and calculating hypothetical rays and shot trajectories. Developers didn't account for this aspect. As we mentioned earlier, Source 2 map development differs from the previous engine. Valve didn't create maps from scratch, but ported them using a special tool, and this led to one big problem. Maps have too many wallbangs through walls that seemingly can't be penetrated. Wallbangs through thick walls, and wallbangs across half the map. This is what many cheaters now know by heart. But why did this happen? CS2 implements bullet penetration mechanics through obstacles. Each weapon has a penetration parameter, and surfaces have their material properties and resistance. When shooting, if a bullet passes through a surface, 2 points are formed: bullet entry and exit points. The game knows exactly whether a shot from a specific weapon can penetrate a specific material, and if it can, how much damage will be reduced after the bullet exits through the obstacle. Moreover, the wall can be non-uniform. From the bullet entry side, the surface might be too thin, while from the exit side, too thick, which doesn't create penetration. Materials like wood let bullets through with small damage reduction, while concrete stops bullets completely or greatly reduces damage. Sounds logical? Not quite. In CS2, even a shot at a seemingly impenetrable wall can practically not reduce damage to the opponent. This indicates inconsistency between the visible model and physics, which can definitely be attributed to CS2's biggest bug: map shortcomings. One of the most frequent explanations for strange wallbangs is the discrepancy between visible geometry and collision. In the Source 2 engine, there's a significant change. Maps are ported from the old engine as a set of models, not brushes, solid blocks. Brush geometry from CSGO, when transferred to Source 2, is broken down into models. If the breakdown algorithm created an imperfect physical model, for example, didn't close a microscopic gap between parts or rounded a corner, then an invisible gap resulted. That is, visually no discrepancy is visible, but technically, the texture is missing a pixel through which penetration occurs. At the same time, some seemingly thick walls aren't actually such. They go into the void, representing nothing more than a thin wall that can be penetrated. We could give hundreds of examples of such positions, but the problem remains the same. Often, a specific wall could be penetrated in a particular place where object points on the map and the wall itself intersect. This place forms a so-called pixel, a very small object section where a bullet can just pass through. This means that penetrable pixels must align both from the bullet entry side into the surface and from its exit side, forming a completely straight line. Let's show an example. We have a wall that intersects with some kind of cladding. The wall itself is objectively impenetrable, but the cladding is quite penetrable. Because the wall doesn't fully cover the cladding, this cladding is on the map on one side and the player sees it, but on the other side, it goes into the void. For example, behind the map. It turns out that if we shoot at this cladding, then at a certain pixel, we simply bypass the wall. Another problem lies not in the map, but in the Source 2 engine imperfection. Strange as it may be, the character model in many places can end up behind the map. For instance, if a character leans against a wall, their main part is covered by the wall, but some small body part, like an arm, sticks out behind the texture. Because of this, the opponent shoots at a wall that seemingly can't be penetrated at the bullet exit point. However, we don't need to fully penetrate the wall. It's enough to penetrate only the outer surface for the bullet to enter the wall and hit the protruding part of the opponent's model behind the textures. Similar things happen when the magic bullet exploit was possible in the game, allowing shooting from 0 coordinates. On Ancient, terrorist side cheaters penetrated the impenetrable, almost instantly killing counter-terrorist opponents through the floor. Some had part of their leg behind textures, while others stood in places with incorrect surface collisions, combining an impenetrable surface with quite penetrable material. Moreover, not only cheats allow gaining advantage through map shortcomings, similar preferences are available to players without using third-party software. If cheaters can wallbang through textures, honest players can get information. For example, on Dust 2, holes in maps haven't been fixed since the game's release, where surfaces don't touch each other. Similar things can be found on other maps like Ancient. Valve's position is ambiguous. On one hand, they release new maps and port them from the previous game version, but on the other hand, they don't fix shortcomings on already released maps. The game will need much more time to eradicate all nuances. Thus, CS2 map development is quite a labor-intensive process. Level design represents not only technical map implementation using specialized software, but also concept development, map geometry planning, timings, sounds, and many other factors to ensure fair and interesting gameplay. Current maps in the game aren't without shortcomings that allow cheaters to run wild and even give honest players advantages. The map porting tool was imperfect, and it seems Valve needs to make many efforts to patch all the holes. Dear friends, that's all for now. We remind you that in our videos we hide Easter eggs that make up subscription activation codes. In this video, you might have noticed several of these. Thank you for watching. This has been the Neverlose team. Stay tuned for more insights in our upcoming videos.